All right. I am trying to figure out how to share things and such. No, I don't want to log out. All right, let's see here. Schedule stream, start replay buffer. So many good options, none of which are what I actually want. All right, what else is there? Uh, all right, let's see here. We're gonna go to. It's probably I shouldn't just be broadcasting the back end everything. But on the same count, there's no one here, so who cares? Wow, they have a lot of Amazon Prime game commercials on this thing. All right, Prime Gaming channel. There we go, channel and video. Brand, creator, home, stream manager? I don't even know. Stream manager. Let's see if this is what I'm looking for. Am I gonna get an endless stack of myself? I think that would be fun. All right. Clip that. Stop raid. Start watch party. Oh, cool. There's a viewer. Don't get overly excited here. I'm still pretty new to this stuff, and I'm just trying to figure out how to even share this out to my friends so that I can bug them and make them watch. All right, here we go. The overall plan here is to write a book using AI, ChatGPT to be specific. I've been using voice to text in Google because that's just kind of a fun uh, hmm, it's a fun way to do it, and it's better than watching me type the whole time. Plus, obviously, uh, anything that you use voice text for comes back as a total mess. So it's cool to watch the AI clean that up. That's going to be one of the more powerful uses for this technology in the near future for sure. All right, let's see here. Extensions. Hmm. Well, we'll worry about that in a minute. Yeah, anyway, getting everything set up for the moment. It really does seem like there ought to be a place to just share this. Like every other thing on the planet has a little button and you can just share it to social media, and I don't know why I can't find that on here. Whatever. Oh boy, 2 new likes. How exciting. At some point I'm actually going to have to get a little serious about this. But anyway, let me just jump into this. That is not what I'm looking for. That's not what I need. So basically it pops out as a wall of spoken text when I'm doing my thing here. And then eventually we get it into something a little less messy, and then by the third iteration, it actually looks pretty good. You can see I've been keeping a hierarchy going just to make it easier to track back on things. That's something I do anytime I'm writing anything, particularly professionally, but just in general, it's a good habit to have if you're a writer. Otherwise, you just kind of lose track of things. There's a lot going on. All right, you can see here the outline that I'm using actually comes from ChatGPT. I had the AI give me its recommended outline. There we go. How did you get over there? All right. Oh, cool. And yesterday and the day before, the past chats were gone, which actually was kind of cool because it let me explore one aspect of this that I hadn't considered until I came up to it, which is, every once in a while as a writer, you lose stuff. It happens. Things die, somebody gets into some shared file and deletes something they shouldn't, and it's gone, and you have to do it over again. It took me maybe 10 minutes to duplicate everything I'd done the first day. This is the third day here right now. And I mean, that's incredible. The thing is, it wasn't just like the writing that was duplicated. There was an outline. I built a slightly different, slightly better outline. And a big part of what I spent the first day doing was getting it to write the way it should, because the sort of raw responses from this thing are very high school term paper-esque. And also, a couple people popped on the chat and we got distracted and talked about some things like uh, how you can manipulate the AI, and we were just trying some stuff here. All right, so here I'm having it outline different aspects, particularly the ethics aspect of it, because there's two sides to the ethics coin here. There's the ethics of AI in general, its impact on people like me who write for a living, uh, various issues with copyright and intellectual property and who owns what. But there's the other side of it too, which is, from my perspective, how to use the AI in an ethical manner, which is, I think, a more interesting topic. I mean, a lot of, not only have the ethics of AI emerging been sort of talked to death at this point, in the past month, what it means for artists and those of us who make our living in that space. So, I mean, that's been done to death, but we haven't really talked about our responsibility as we here at the beginning of this whole, what will be a revolution and a major, major shift in how things get done, how we position the transition ethically, like how we use it. Because there's a lot of like there's a lot of worries I have. I mean, my job, to be a little flippant about it, is to convince people that they want to do something or buy something that they didn't even know they wanted 30 seconds ago. Right? Now, you can do that with logic. Appeal to logic is one of the three main uh, rhetorical tools that you probably learned in college. And I'm perfectly comfortable with a computer doing that, because when you're thinking logically, you're in kind of your smartest space. Like, it doesn't matter how smart or dumb you are, logic is a set of tools, and when you use them, it effectively makes you make better decisions than you would without using it. Now, same thing when you appeal to pathos, to make that emotional appeal. Uh, if you're angry, you're stupid. I've done some political writing, and there's an art to that, in which I wasn't particularly fond of. But the art to it is, you make people angry, because no matter how smart someone is, when they are angry, they are stupid. And it works for most emotions, actually. Anger is just the easiest one to tap into, as social media has very profoundly and obnoxiously proven in the past decade. But you got to do it in a way where you present the truth, which is where you meet your ethical burden, the truth, in a way that makes people angry and gets them to make conclusions that you want them to make, go in the direction you want them to go. Now, that is very different from logic, and it makes me very nervous, because I don't really want to train the computers, the AI, immediately, pretty much as soon as we invent anything that's even sort of worth the title of artificial intelligence, to immediately teach it how to, and reward it for, uh, efficiently manipulating the emotions of people on a large scale. It's not hard to see how that might go horribly, horribly wrong. Honestly, the only The only burden, the only difficulty in thinking of scenarios where that could go horribly wrong is in like mm, stopping thinking of the scenarios that it could go wrong. There's pretty much just an avalanche of them. Nothing good can come of it, with the possible exception of some people gaining a lot of money or a lot of power, and that would only be good for them. It does write in an extraordinarily boring fashion if you aren't training it. So the key here is you got to give it, you ask it for something and you say, write about, let's see, I caps locked for these titles because I thought it'd be easier to find the spots that I would want to refer back to in here. Oh, here we go. Use this overall tone when generating content in this thread, please. So what I did was I took content from the AI that I had requested from it. I edited it and then I gave it back to it. And I said, write it more like this. And then over the course of the chat, it got better and better at writing more like that. And the cool thing is, since I'd lost all this stuff that you see over here on the side, and I had to start over, it relearned, um, frankly, several years worth of writing technique in teaching to a human. It relearned them inside of 15 minutes of training, which is mind blowing. Absolutely knocked my feet out from under me. I wasn't ready for it. Buckle up, here we go. The other interesting thing is there were a couple things that didn't appear in its original version that I added in, like thoughts to consider about ethics that weren't included at all in the AI summary of the ethical concerns. And then later on, I noticed in sort of the follow-ups here, they did include it. Now I don't know, and I'm really curious whether that is something that it added into its personal responses to me and is personalized for me, or now that I have put those concerns or those particular uh, phrases and ideas out there into the AI, if those are going to start popping up in this, what do they call it? NPL? Let's see. There we go. Safe bet that it will negatively impact. Not NPL, NLP. There we go, NLP. Just a little dyslexic there. All right. So here is the overall outline of the book we're going to write. And by we, I mean I and the AI, which about 2 minutes into this started referring to itself as a writer, which I think is fair. But it is a little weird to have a conversation about writing that rapidly turns into the ever more conversational AI saying things like we writers. It also kind of undercuts the entire concept of the Turing test because I think AIs will be able to masquerade in a way that we can't tell them apart from humans far, far, far before they gain anything that resembles intelligence or free will. And that's mostly an artifact of this right here, natural language processing. So the computer isn't smart, it's just good at grabbing words that make it seem smart. It's basically it's basically really just a really big search engine that does some weird magic voodoo that I don't understand yet and pops out reasonably good responses based on it. It's it's essentially a copy paste tool combined with a sort of phrase generator combined with a search engine. And I mean, I don't want to undercut the absolute genius of this thing or the people that made it, but it is a cool but very clear case of what's called emergent behavior. Now, I don't know if you have a biology background, but it was something I do, and it was something that really interested me, and I almost ended up studying, if my life had taken a slightly different turn, which is emergent behavior, which is things like slime mold and ants have very limited instructions. Same for viruses, but you need to get a little more complex before it gets cool. It looks like there's some pretty cool stuff going on and complex things going on with bacteria that they didn't even know about or were barely starting to know about back when I was in college. But things in that like low key bees, ants, slime mold category where they have very limited genetic instructions but enormous complex behaviors, essentially behaving as a superorganism, are really interesting because from a coding perspective, or really anything, it's the amount of lines in the case of code, but you can just think of it as the amount of energy you put in for complex output. This is an extraordinary case of emergent behavior where you have relatively simple instructions. The base layer, everything is going on way down at the bottom, is actually really pretty simple, but the combination is extraordinarily complex. Ants, for example, count their steps. So they know that, I believe, like the midden, the place where the food goes, is supposed to be here, and the waste stuff is supposed to be twice as far away. And there's some chemical feedback back loops and stuff. But in the end, you can have something that has an amount of neurons that isn't even enough to control the hand on a human that is functioning as an entire hive of really, or colony in the case of ants, really very complex behavior. And this is actually one of my favorite science experiments ever. Do you know how they figured out that ants count their steps? Because there are a lot of ways ants could be keeping track of distance in theory. But what they did was they took ants and they glued stilts to their little tiny ant legs so that their legs were twice as long. And everything in the ant hill and the colony became twice as far apart. Which, science. Sometimes you do really important research by gluing little tiny sticks to the legs of insects. And I mean, to be clear, like that sort of research leads directly to things like this. Like they're a closely conceptually linked branch of science. It's sort of where biology and computer science touch. All right, let's see here. The hard part about this format, for me, the hardest part so far, has been jumping back in each night and figuring out where I am, which takes longer when you're trying to keep a conversation going and be entertaining and organize things and figure out how to promote a channel and, of course, figure out how any of this works. Fortunately, I have a giant mug of tea to help me with that. All right. Now, obviously, I'm not keeping to this outline because this is not an outline of a good book. It's the outline of an excellent white paper or, senior thesis research paper, maybe. Let's see. Yeah, like 5,000 word introduction to explain the emergence of AI and its potential for writers, and an overview of the book's contents. Neither one of those things is necessary. So that's 5,000 words. Poof, gone. Also, this is my favorite part of this so far is the errors the AI makes in things that I see in beginning writers, and I love that it is going through a process similar to what a human goes through, although granted quite a bit faster, but it's going through a process that I wouldn't actually have expected it to go through. It's one of the many fun surprises I've had while doing this. But one of the greatest marks of an early writer that's just getting started is the ridiculously overlong, unnecessarily descriptive title. Uh, right? Like this is a bit much. AI for writers: improving craft and productivity in the age of artificial intelligence. I've noticed that the AI is a little dramatic about AI. It's got very dry language unless you prompt it not to, except where AI is concerned. The age of AI. There's a very mediocre Marvel movie with almost that same title on a similar concept. All right. One of the things I've been looking at and considering and going back and forth about, and it's always one of the hardest parts of writing, is so at the end of the day, whether you're writing something big or small, it's about having the right conversation with the right people at the right time, which is another really kind of convoluted way of saying know your audience. Am I aiming more for the nerds? Am I aiming more for people like me? Like, I'm a writer with a science background, so I'm comfortable with math. I have been dragged kicking and screaming and occasionally voluntarily through the shallower regions of coding. The coding kiddie pool, I guess, would be one way to put it, and so on and so forth. Or am I looking for more generic and confused writers, people that don't have a strong technical background? And that's where I'm leaning towards, which means I do have to take some time to explain this, but I need to explain the fundamentals of AI and natural language processing very gently. Or the whole point of this is figuring out ways that we can use AI to amplify ourselves as writers or creatives, which basically usually means um, saving time, iterating on ideas. I think that's going to be, I've already seen it with the design side of things, but I think it's going to be true for writing too. Probably the most powerful use of this is the AI can do a mediocre job of almost anything you ask it to. And by mediocre, I mean as well as the average person would do it or better in 3 or 4 seconds. You know, it can take a day of human work and turn it into 3 or 4 seconds. That means that I now have time, instead of thinking for a little bit and then trying out a certain way of saying something, I now have the ability as a writer to go option one, option two, option three. And while ChatGPT doesn't work this way, come on, Midjourney absolutely, absolutely does. This was something that I made at the end of the last, or I guess no, the first thing I did. I was showing this to one of the guys I was talking to on the channel, and he or she, I don't know, Orion, was we ended up talking about honey badgers. And I was saying, like combining AI with honey badgers is how it's actually going to end, right? So, cyborg honey badgers, boom, it's all over. So then I went over here to Midjourney, and you can see I asked it to do sort of a Revolutionary War oil on canvas style painting of honey badgers as cyborgs. And it didn't do a great job, but it gave me 4 options. It gave me 4 options again, and then it gave me 4 options here and 4 options here. And I said, okay, well, for each one of these, I can vary them, I can upscale them, I can make other alternate versions of them. And you can see here, we've gone through, if I were going to sketch this out, even if I had the ability to churn out something this good, which I don't, but I could certainly do bad sketches of this. You know, it took maybe an hour, maybe more of sort of conceptualizing, turned it into 5 minutes. And then we ended up at two, I think, passable results. I like this guy's outfit a little bit more, but I think this guy is a better cyborg honey badger. He looks more like a badger and more like a cyborg. I didn't manage to, the AI couldn't really handle a little bit of revolutionary flair to it. But that's good because that's where humans come in, right? We get an idea, most of the way to where we want it to be with the AI now, and then we can clean it up, refine it, and it kind of takes the boring middle of creativity and wipes it clean. Now, I'm not 100% sure that's a good thing because a lot of good work happens in that boring middle, but I would certainly be willing to go for a couple spins on that merry-go-round and just see how it is if I don't have to waste time there. If I can just be working on concepts, iterations of concepts, and then skip straight to the final draft. Holy cow. Forget a book a year. I could turn out a book a week that way. At least I'd be able to once it got good enough to copy my style for fiction and dialogue, which I haven't tried yet, but I don't have nearly as much hope for. Among other things, it refuses to say something mean, so it's going to be hard to ratchet up that drama. All right, statistical models. There is another similarity with the college essay world here. There are a lot of slightly rephrased statements of the same thing, and a lot of statements which, when you really look at them, don't mean much, right? NLP, which is natural language processing, NLP relies on a set of algorithms and statistical models that enable computers to process and analyze text data. What does that actually mean? Almost nothing. It gives you true information, but not actionable information. Like, you don't read this sentence and have a better idea of what an NLP is than you did at the start of the sentence. Because, I mean, if you've read this far, you already know. I mean, algorithm really, it involves math. Whoa. Statistical models? What? Like, duh. Now, these algorithms are trained on large amounts of text data to recognize patterns, and statistical models, and make predictions about the meaning of language. Now, that's interesting, but again, this sentence takes you from A to like W, and it glosses over, you know, what would that be? B through V. Next time I pick random letters to go through, I will not pick the two most common sounding or most similar sounding letters by mistake. B and V. Those kind of funny that I managed to do that just by randomly grabbing letters. Okay. One of the key challenges of NLP is dealing with the inherent ambiguity of human language. Okay, like, yeah, that's one of the challenges of being human, too. So here it's telling us nothing we don't know and teaching us nothing. Large amounts of data and make predictions about new text inputs. Deep learning techniques like neural networks enable complex language modeling by processing input data through multiple layers of computational nodes. What is a deep learning technique? What does it mean to process input data through multiple layers of computational nodes? What are layers of computational nodes? I don't know. All right. Anyway, so here we're running into some of the challenges of writing a book with AI because it's not a very good teacher yet. All right. Part of me wants to be a jerk and just say do a better job of explaining this, but keep it simple. Providing to facilitate learning. That's a suitably obnoxiously generic thing. And then we'll throw please on the end just because I want our new robot overlords to know I was polite. All right. So sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't know how much of that is the resourcing on the engine and how much of it is when you ask it a hard question, it just needs more time. So natural language processing is a field of artificial intelligence that focuses on helping computers understand, interpret, and generate human language. At its core, NLP relies on a combination of machine learning algorithms and linguistic knowledge, interesting, not statistical models this time, to process natural language data. Machine learning algorithms analyze large amounts of language to identify patterns, structures, and relationships between words, phrases, and sentences, doing a much better job this time. These algorithms use this information to make predictions and decisions based on new language data. It doesn't say what kind of predictions, really. To process language, maybe they're getting to it. To process language, NLP uses a variety of techniques such as part of speech tagging, which it doesn't look like it explains. Oh, there it goes. It's doing a much better job. Named entity recognition and sentiment analysis. You like how I was explaining in parentheticals what each of these items means now? See, this is the part of this that really is incredible. You will see marked and notable improvement if you give it the right instructions. So there's still some nuance to it. It can't read your mind. So there's going to be sort of the same skill that there is, I think, involved in finding the right answers online now. Like you have to have a certain knack for asking the right question if you want to get to the right answer. Ah, there we go. Now we're getting into the statistical models. They use machine learning algorithms to predict the probability of the next word in a sentence. These models are trained on large amounts of text data, such as books or web pages, and use patterns and structures they find in the text to make predictions about new sentences. That is pretty cool. 1 second here. Getting a text from my girlfriend, who always gets priority. Let's see, went to the gym. Now I am streaming. What are you up to? Alright, as its core, so this is a much better explanation of what we're dealing with here. Alright, so let's take this over. You can see here, at its core is a phrase that picked. You're going to see a lot of that, especially intros to answers. Like they tend to diverge as they're moving down, and that may be, now that I'm thinking of it, it's certainly an artifact of that statistical probability that they were talking about. Like it looks at a sentence and it says, what is the probability of the next word being whatever? But it very often starts the same and then diverges as it moves forward. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add the new one. I'm going to hit Control-Alt-0 to clear all of that weird formatting and so on and so forth. Natural language is a field of artificial intelligence. NLP relies on a combination. Now, whether you're editing what a human writes or what a computer writes or what you, as a human, have written, potentially using the help of a computer, you're going to want to delete a lot of it. I work in a field that lets me look at results, statistical analysis of very large data sets that are responses to things I have written for a very large corporation, and that has let me have a great deal of fun analyzing what works for people and with people and what doesn't. People will stick around if you are giving them something that is worth their time, even if it is long. But it should always be as brief as reasonably possible. Now, that doesn't mean you have to suck all the life and the fun out of it. That stuff has its place and it helps. But at its core, to borrow a phrase from my computer friend here, at its core, you need to be able to move them as quickly as possible from one area to the next. They need to feel like they are moving. If people are reading and there's not sort of the metaphorical presence, feeling of movement, you will lose them. Like they will be out the door. So you need to just keep sweeping them forward, on to the next thing. A lot of that means giving them just enough information to keep them curious and go on to the next step. But a big part of it is just not wasting their time and bogging them down in a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be there. So I guess what I mean there is write for the reader, don't write for you. Always be looking at it and going, okay, but how does this line, this word, this paragraph help the person that I'm guiding through this task? Your job is to guide them through the writing, not to force them into a corridor and poke them along it until they end up where you want them to be. Linguistic knowledge to process natural language data. So one thing we're running into here, which is going to slow people down a little bit, is this first sentence is a mouthful, right? It's got a lot of big words, which makes people's eyes glaze over. I like big words. I like science and I like writing. I like big words coming and going. But even my eyes glaze over when I look at a sentence like this one here. It relies on a combination of machine learning algorithms and linguistic knowledge to process language data. Whoop, how did that happen? All right. But this is a really important sentence, so we can't just drop it. So what we're going to do is we're going to give them a little bit of breathing space and completely undermine what I just said about making things briefer by adding something here. Something to make people feel at ease and as if they don't really need to understand it all. So they'll breeze through it. If they are feeling overwhelmed, they won't feel too weird about it. And we are going to get rid of that. Let's see. Process natural language. Now, anytime when we, like, see how we said machine learning algorithms, which is a mouthful, machine learning algorithms, right up here, and then it immediately said it again. Anytime you have the same subject, especially if it's some big thing, starting two sentences in a row, that is a strong indication that you should be combining these two sentences, unless the next one is very long, which what this one is, but we're going to make it shorter. Machine learning algorithms analyze large amounts of language data. Here, actually, there we go. Look at that. We got rid of half a paragraph there. Now, we haven't actually lost anything that was being said in that paragraph, but we've managed to get rid of half of it. Machine learning algorithms analyze large amounts of language data to identify patterns, structures, and relationships between words, phrases, and sentences. And this is extra nice because we're finishing with something that'll be really familiar with people, like patterns and structures and relationships. First off, it's following the rule of three, which is fantastic with lists, but it's starting with one that's a little weird, right? And people are going to be like, I don't really understand what that means. But then they're going to go over here, words, phrases, sentences. They're going to go, okay, okay, I'm on solid ground again. The ice was a little thin here in the middle, but I'm back on solid ground. I can keep going. These algorithms then use this information to make predictions or decisions based on new language data. And that's actually a pretty good succinct example of what's going on based on that earlier like 3 paragraphs that we slogged through in its less good explanation, right? What it's doing is it's looking at a bit of everything. It's doing some math with it, and then it is spitting out its best guess of what it should be producing. Basically, a good way to think of this is you've got a big old sheet with a pattern on it, like, I don't know, a Where's Waldo book or whatever. It doesn't really matter. With something big and complex and there is a hole in it, and you're saying, hey, AI, what goes here in this hole? And it is looking for other places where there is a pattern similar to the one you're looking at that's around the hole, but there's no hole there. I just said hole a whole lot of times. All right, let's start that over. Basically what this thing is doing is it's looking at a big old complex sheet with a big gap in it. And what it does is it goes and finds other sheets or other parts of this sheet that have areas that look like the edges of this gap, and then it's looking at what's in the middle of this gap, and it's guessing from these other places what should be in the blank spot. It's drawing in based on context, the same way humans do. It is a very, very human neural sort of learning and action, which is probably why it does such a good job of picking up on our strengths and our weaknesses as it is developing, and such a good job of really giving a very human feeling answer to things. So this language NLP uses a variety of techniques such as part of speech tagging, this is a big old chonker of a sentence here, but it is broken up well. But we're actually going to, and technically this is misusing paragraphs. We shouldn't really be spacing this out, but one of the most important things that you can do with paragraphs, and I think in general in writing we are taught that paragraphs are bite-sized chunks of an idea with an intro and an outro, basically transitions from the paragraph before and into the paragraph after. That's a very college way of looking at it, and you're taught to do it that way, and it's terrible writing. You barely ever need transitions between paragraphs because most ideas don't fit into a paragraph. So a really careful transition from one paragraph that's really talking about the same idea to another paragraph that's talking about the same idea. We don't need a line to get us out of one paragraph, a line to get us into the next paragraph, and so on and so forth. You only need those transitions when there's a transition of thought. When you, as the writer, are getting the reader to change directions and you don't want, or maybe a better way to put it is you, as a writer, are shifting gears and you don't want your reader grinding theirs when they get there. So what we're going to do is just space this out. And we'll use bullet points. Or maybe check marks. Nope, never mind. Those are not the check marks. Oh, I'd forgotten about this. Oh, good, they fixed it. This used to be an absolutely terrible part of Google Docs. Like, their bulleted lists were just a mess. But they work fine now. All right. Oh, except I don't need a list there. Okay, there we go. We aren't going to worry too much about any kind of formatting right now beyond the stuff I need to keep track of where I am. But we'll go ahead and bold that. So what we've done here is we've taken a complex paragraph, we've broken it out into little tiny bite-sized chunks that human brains can handle and maybe even read. The other thing we're going to do here is there's a million right ways to do bullets. The most important rule of doing bullets is all the bullets should be the fucking same. That means they should be following the same patterns, they should be in the same tense, they should be roughly the same length, and the intros should either all be the same or all different. Like, don't give me a bullet, like 3 bullets that say includes blah blah blah, and then finish up with also comes with, right? Like, now everything ends with a parenthetical followed by a period. There are also some things about this AI that just blow humans out of the water right from day one. Properly punctuating e.g. or example given with that little comma right there. Most writers would forget that. I forget that half the time. But it's never going to miss that. And that's pretty cool. I'm not that worried as a writer about this replacing me because there's a big gap between what I do and what this does. And I feel like actually what this will do is let me do the things that I do much more effectively and efficiently. Especially since, like I said, I have a science background. Right now I'm learning Python and taking active steps to make sure that I can be the boss of the AI if the AI takes my job. But if I were an editor, specifically a copy editor, not a content editor or anything of that sort, but a copy editor, I would be looking at what I wanted to go back to school for right now. Because this is better. This is already better at the job than a really good copy editor. It also involves the use of language models, which are statistical models that use another rule. This is another fun one that this computer does, the AI does, ChatGPT does, that humans do. And it makes sense because it's learning from humans. I learned it from you, Dad. It uses that so often when it doesn't need to use that. In fact, we want this to be in a more active tense, which is a little bit of a disappointment because I've already had a couple conversations with it about being more active and engaging in the way it writes. Good writing is like water. It flows. It's not like bricks that you just stack up. It moves of its own accord. It moves from left to right and top to bottom in the English language, but it does most certainly move. There's a reason when they talk about people who are really in the zone writing, the words just flow out of them. Also, which are statistical models, comma statistical models. NLP also involves the use of, it doesn't need to involve the use of, also uses language models. Technically, this shouldn't be a comma. We should be using a colon or potentially a semicolon. You could get away with a semicolon there if you wanted to. But people get weird about colons and semicolons. And this is a non-traditional but pretty widely accepted in general day use of a comma. And we're not going to go too into talking about commas because frankly, I've only got one viewer right now and I don't want to make it 0 just yet. All right, statistical models using machine learning algorithms to predict the probability of the next word sentence. We're actually going to change this whole thing. Watch this. hold on, we'll copy it so you can compare the two. Actually, hold on. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to hit Control Z a few times so we can get back to what we had here. Okay. I'm going to show you how much we improve this sentence and why ChatGPT isn't going to steal my job yet. All right. So NLP also involves the use of language models, which are statistical models that use machine learning algorithms to predict the probability of the next word in a sentence. So that's the original one. All right. Now let's see what we can do with this and make it better. NLP predicts the probability of the next word in a sentence using language models, statistical models using machine learning algorithms. Now we're going to change one of these using z to with. Actually, we're going to get rid of statistical models. We're going to get rid of that. Using machine learning algorithms and language models. Statistical language models. Now, this may or may not be the quite right term for it. I am being pretty generic here, but it does say language models, which are statistical models, which implies that these are statistical language models. But anyway, so let's look at that. We haven't actually changed the length of the sentence very much. I missed the word count from Word. We've gotten rid of, what, 20, 30 characters, 23 characters, and that's not much. But now we have an active sentence. NLP predicts. It's not passive. NLP also involves the use of language models. We aren't beating around the bush. We're saying what it does and how it does it. This model, like many humans, likes to explain the what after it explains the why. And I don't understand that. It seems to be a human thing. It makes sense that it learned it from us, but it's much more effective when you're writing to explain the what so people have a reason to care about the why. So what, then why, not why, then what. I think it's a leftover from when we're children. Actually, when we're in trouble, we want to explain the what before we explain, or we want to explain the why before we do the what, because we already know that they know the what, right? And you really want to, you have like your 10 seconds before the grown-up starts yelling at you, so you really got to use that to explain the why. Like you got to make your best case for why, and the what can happen later. But it's not a good habit to carry over into adulthood. That was a really noisy gulp. I hope you couldn't hear that. Glunk. All right, these models are trained on large amounts of text data. Now we can squish that up there where it belongs, such as books, and use patterns and use the patterns and structures they find. We don't need to say in the text because we already know it's looking in books and web pages. They find to make predictions about new sentences. And we're actually going to change Nah, we'll keep predictions. I was thinking about changing it to guesses. All right. You never need to say overall, and very often, again, whether this is a human or a computer writing this, everything after the word overall can be deleted, but we won't do that quite yet. We are at this paragraph is the last bit of the newer, cleaner, better explanation of natural language processing. So we'll do this and then we'll run through the old thing and then we'll be good. Somewhere here I have, I thought, an extension that was supposed to, okay, I'm not crazy. There is an extensions uh, menu item there, but not here. All right. Hold on, let's try refreshing this. There we go. All right, let's get back to where we were. And we're going to add the reason I wanted to do that was document navigator. Cool. Writing habit. Start tracking. There we go. So I was using this little extension to keep loose track of how much work we're doing. I'm not too worried about the fact that I haven't had it on yet because we haven't actually added very many words. At least we've added a chunk that's about the same size as a chunk we are about to delete. So that's not overwhelming. All right. Overall, NLP is a complex field that combines linguistics, computer science, NLP, and actually we're going to finish it up with natural language processing because this is a new term for most people, which means every so often, even though you don't technically have to, from a stylistic standpoint, you want to go ahead and say the whole thing, just so they don't have to flip back and look for it. It's a complex field. We don't really need to say that. In fact, is a complex field that, again, see, that does not need to be there. Like most that's. Combines, so now we're just going to summarize it. Instead of saying overall, we're just going to do the overall. Natural language processing combines linguistics, computer science, and statistics to help computers understand and process human language. By using machine algorithms and linguistic knowledge, but we've already gone through all that, so we don't need to say that. NLP is able to help computers read and interpret text, generate new text, and even hold conversations with humans. Now, we're going to get rid of almost all of this. All right, this paragraph is pretty good, but we're going to move it up because it doesn't make sense there. It makes perfect sense right here. Right after we talk about making predictions, we'll go into natural language understanding. We don't need to say is another important component. Involves using computers to understand the meaning of text by identifying entities, relationships, and sentiment. For example, an NLP model might be trained to recognize that a sentence like "I love the beach" expresses a positive sentiment towards the beach. So this includes a concrete example, which is always good. Some people don't care about them, a lot of people do, and I find that sprinkling them in there helps keep people engaged. There's a certain sort of person that needs to, there's a certain sort of people or group of people that learn conceptually through description and others that learn by abstraction. So if I were to explain to the conceptual group of people a bucket, I would say it's a large vessel with an open top meant for holding liquid. I'd probably specify that it's watertight, but most of them would figure that out from the fact that it was meant for holding liquid, usually with a handle. All right, that gets you pretty close to what a bucket is. from a conceptual standpoint. Now, the abstraction learning people, for them, you want to say a bucket is a really big cup with a handle on it. Again, people get to the same place. They just don't always take the same path to get there. They're visual learners, auditory learners. They're people that sort of mushy, mashy around in the middle and don't really see or hear things they're learning. They just sort of stick concepts together, and then they have to translate them into images or words, which uh, I tend to be. Which oddly enough makes me a good writer because I always have to think about things that I'm putting into words, and a really, really bad verbatim memorizer. Like I can memorize a lot of information and like concepts and that sort of thing, but got like Shakespeare, like remember my lines? Oh, what a battle. All right. Find joy in crooks and babbling brooks and see, I can't even remember that. That's one of my favorite lines. Natural language processing combines linguistics, computer science, and statistics to help computers understand and process human language. All right, great. Now let's look at this last little bit here. This is a powerful technology with broad applications across a wide range of industries, not just writing. From chatbots and virtual assistants to automated language translation and sentiment analysis, NLP is helping make human-machine interactions more natural and intuitive. So what does that mean for us and writing as a career? That there is a transition. All right. The now. I'm dividing this up by sort of the immediate and then the future impact of AI and the ethics of AI. You can see I haven't really put these together in the right order yet. That's part of the whole point of organizing them is, you know, the joy of word processors. You can just drag and drop stuff. It's not like you need to retype the page. All right. The now. AI is already having a significant impact on the writing profession. I don't love that. In fact, we're going to get rid of that. AI is, we are going to put already in there. Create that sense of urgency. I like that. Urgency is good. AI is already changing the way we approach writing. For one, it's going to make the writing process faster and more efficient. Proofreading, even content creation, like one word, short amount of time. In fact, AI is going to make adaptable writers even more valuable. This was the bit, by the way, that wasn't included when I was talking about the ethics of writing, and I added it in an edited version of what eventually became this. And then it appeared not just in the AI and ChatGPT's second go around at it, but also in future iterations that weren't directly linked to this. So other areas where its responses touched on ethics, it brought it up. And like I said, I am profoundly curious as to whether that is something that is only going to be occurring in my personal correspondence with the computer, or if ChatGPT is now going to be folding that into similar conversations with other people. This is a really noisy chair. All right, hang on here. Checking in with my girlfriend. And my buddy that's in the Air Force is obviously bored because he's sending me a lot of reels on Instagram, which turns out, like, apparently being a pilot, like an Air Force pilot, cool job and all. They're all a bunch of nerds, but like The only two messages I ever get from him are some variation on one, I am so bored, and dude, listen to how I almost just died. Nothing in between. Apparently, right now, he is in a bored phase. And hopefully on the ground. There will. I'm going to do something I don't normally do and add a little aside in there. Normally this kind of breaks up the flow, which normally, like I said, you want this to flow, you want it to move. You don't really want to break it up because people just want to ride that current. They want to just ride a lazy river of words all the way to the end. But every once in a while, you do need to give them a slow section to, I don't know, rearrange themselves on their metaphorical inner tubes. So what we're doing here is very consciously taking a breath, right? There will, of course, be challenges incorporating AI into the writing process. It's also going to sort of low-key confirm some of their biases and suspicions, which is never a bad idea when you are trying to get people to head down a path you want them to head down, uh, a mental path. Writers will need to be willing to learn how to use these new tools effectively and be open to new ways of approaching their craft. Obviously, I'm trying to make that's something I put in here. I'm trying to make that case because that's the case for this entire book existing, right? Like, yeah. In short, you never ever need to say in short. It is an inherently ironic phrase because it says in short. It says this by making things longer. It's like starting a sentence with I'll be brief. You have already failed before you've even gotten to the part that you actually wanted to say. But rather than being something to fear, it should be viewed as an opportunity to grow and improve as writers. With the right mindset and approach, AI can help writers to produce, it doesn't need to help them to produce, help writers produce higher quality work more efficiently than ever before. Now, I wrote some of this, but a surprising amount of this came from ChatGPT. All right. This is an almost the same section here that I just wasn't completely pleased with. So we're going to get rid of that. All of this right here, gone. And that's going to create our smooth transition to the ethics of AI and writing. And obviously the now is just a stand-in title for this section. There we go. This is a little bit of a retread, but since it's a retread of the central thesis of this book, we are going to go ahead and give a little nudge to, hey, be motivated or you're going to be replaced by a machine. Read this book. Maybe that's what I should rename it. Since, if we're going to have a long title, it should probably be something like 10 must-learn secrets for writers who don't want to be replaced by computers and have to go work at Taco Bell. I mean, I stack words for a living, man. I don't have any transferable skills. I have nothing to offer the world except the ability to take what they say and slightly change it to make it sound like someone slightly smarter said it. That's the only thing I add to society. I mean, that's not actually true. I do other things. Also, I'm very, very good at convincing people to click buttons. we don't have to say also because we already said also. I think this is an artifact also of the like statistical way that it learns things. It's just kind of looking at the words that came before and then guessing what the next word should be. And I think this is another artifact of that, which is it often feels like it has forgotten what it just said. Right? It'll reuse a word or a turn of phrase or a concept that it very recently pulled out. And we'll discuss in more detail shortly. Writers will need to remain okay, that's 3 times in 3 paragraphs, but I'm going to keep it for now. We'll just make sure that we don't hit up on it too hard moving forward. The ethics of AI in writing. Now, this is an area that at the beginning of this book, creation process, I had only considered from one side. Now that I'm considering it from both, which I'm only doing because there was a small aside in the outline that ChatGPT suggested. I'm very excited about this section, and I do think it's going to take a considerable amount more work than most of the rest of this. There are certain things that the AI can grapple with very effectively. Just ate part of my mustache. Yeah, sexy. All right. Oh boy, let's see. Yeah, things like grappling with complex ethical relationships do not play to the strengths of this system. But anyway, this is the part that really interests me. And of course, I wrote this, the computer didn't. The ethical concerns in AI aren't limited to what AI can do to humans. In many ways, the greater concern is what humans can do with AI. So I'm less worried about what the computers are going to do to us than what we are going to do with the computers. As the first generation of AI augmented writers, you like that. It'll be up to us. Normally, I would turn this into a contraction to keep it a little bit more casual and conversational, but in this case, I do want to add that certain um, extra gravitas that comes with making people's internal narrator actually speak out each word. The ethical implications and create the operating principles for this emerging field. Then we've got some hypothetical questions or some rhetorical questions, which I don't normally use, but they were created by ChatGPT, and I thought it did a really nice job here. When AI is used to generate content, who owns that content? Is it the person who programmed the AI, the person who trained it, or the machine itself? I mean, that's a pretty cool question. Like, that's thorny. That's something you can, that's a meaty, just conundrum that you can really sink your teeth into and chew on for a little bit, right? Like, what percentage of the ownership for anything belongs to the computer? And for that matter, like if I were to create a really good version of ChatGPT for writers, would it not be reasonable for me to charge a percentage of the royalties, right? If 100 writers use my uh, algorithm, my version of ChatGPT to write novels that sold well, shouldn't I, as the creator of the tool they used, get a portion of that? But then if I get a portion of that, certainly the creators of ChatGPT, like a record skip there, ChatGPT should too. And I don't have a great answer for that yet. But I am delighted by the question. All right. So it looks like tonight, since it's already what, after 10? Well after 10, and I only go towards to like to 11 because I do have a day job. And also, I am training to go on a hike to Havasupai, Mooney Falls, and all that in a month, which is only like a 10-mile hike, but I want to get there before all the yuppies and Instagram models snag all the good campsites. So I've been training to just be ready to just book it for 10 miles into the Grand Canyon. And anyway, to make a long story kind of long, I am exhausted. I've been working out a lot and I am so damned tired. Which isn't all bad because I do ramble when I'm tired, which actually interacts pretty well with streaming. By the way, anyone who's watching this is always welcome to chime in with comments, questions, or I don't know, criticisms. Um, my favorite one so far is that I move my eyebrows too much, which I don't know what to do. Like it's not like I'm consciously moving them. Like I'm not thinking like, all right, time to move this one, time to move that one. It just happens, all right? It's my face doing my face things. Finally, there are concerns related to transparency and responsibility. These are more obvious things. I don't know how deep I want to go into that. So now, let's see. Let's go back to our outline. Now, this is something that we do absolutely want in there, but we want it in at the end. But we can do it right now because I think this will be a really quick and easy one since it's purely factual. Anything that's purely factual and in no way subjective is 100% leaning towards the strength of the AI. Basically, if you can look it up, the AI can look it up and write it out faster than you can. All right. Let's see. Chapter 2. Write a rough draft this chapter for me. Although it is worth noting that everything in this is at least 2 years old. So I am going to have to do a bit of this myself, probably. Although one thing myself and Orion, the person that stuck around on the last call with me and really had a great conversation, like we hardcore nerded out here, and I discovered while we were kind of tinkering with this thing, is that it does learn information about the world and remember it based on the questions we ask. So at the beginning of this thing, like way back when it first came out, one of the first questions I asked, sort of with that thought in mind, was basically what it knew and whether it knew about the war between Russia and the Ukraine, because that's big news. It's in all the news. It's something that would be likely to leak in to the database unexpectedly of things that this knows, right? It's a very pervasive, high profile thing. And it didn't know anything about it. It did give a pretty good outline of how a conflict might progress between Russia and Ukraine, especially considering all its info was 2 years old, but it didn't have any info on it. But the night before last, when I asked it, do you know about the war between Russia and the Ukraine? Or Russia and Ukraine. Sorry, Ukrainians. I don't know why everybody puts an article before the Ukraine, but it's a habit I'm trying to wean myself of. In any case, I asked it if it knew about the conflict, and it said yes. Now, what does that mean? That means that all of us asking questions about it have effectively informed it that there is a conflict and of various details about that conflict, which is a case of some of the safeguards that have been put around it not working as intended, which is inevitable. I used to work in this lab building, right? And you'd lose your keys to it sometimes. This was back in the days when, there were hard keys to get into the building, like actual shaped chunks of metal that you slid into a hole and twisted for any youngins that are watching. Now, when you lost your key, I mean, I always found mine again, but when you lost your key, you didn't want to admit that you lost a key because these were keys to a big building full of expensive stuff, so you got in big trouble and also fined and a bunch of other stuff for the new keys, potentially for changing the locks. I mean, what if they had to change the locks completely? I mean, I'm sure they never did, but the point is, it was a big deal when you lost your keys in theory, but in practice, it was never a big deal if you lost your keys or misplaced them or forgot them because this was a big building with a lot of doors. And somewhere on this building, at any given time, day or night, any day of the week, and on vacations, you know, when the schools closed down for winter vacation or summer vacation or whatever, at least one door to the building was always unlocked. It became sort of like a joke among student researchers was, you know, doesn't matter, there's always one door unlocked. And I've kind of taken that to heart as an aspect of security in general. If a system is complex enough, it has holes in it. Like nothing complex is actually secure. There is no ship that is truly watertight. It's always leaking somewhere. You're always pumping water out of it. The bigger the ship, the more water you're pumping. In recent years, AI. Okay, expand on that. All right, let's see what it does here, because this is obviously woefully insufficient. And an overview. I do think I get the hiccups like twice a year, so it makes sense it would happen on one of these calls. Um, all right, so I think this is actually not a bug. I think this is a feature. I think the AI is purposely designed to give very non-specific answers right now, or if specific, I don't know the right way to say this, but general specific answers, specific generalities, of which of course is a contradiction of terms by definition, but I think it should be clear what I'm talking about here. It gives just enough information to be accurate and technically correct while not providing specifics because specifics are more likely to be wrong. And if you will recall, Google's version of this made a mistake on giving specific information about the James Webb Space Telescope, which cost Google a, what was it, $100 billion in market cap. So when a mistake can cost you enough money to buy a small or medium-sized country, you are probably going to err on the side of keeping it a little loose. I mean, that's just me. Oh boy, it is taking some time. I love it. It's asking me questions. Every time I feel like I got a real feel for this thing and its limitations, it it just joggles my elbow and I see something that I didn't see before or in a way I didn't see it before. And I mean this stuff can be scary and alarming and a little discomforting because you know that's what change is in many cases. But there's I mean beauty and wonder in this too. Like that we are living at a place and a time where we are taking rock and electricity and simple instructions and blending them together into something that is a believable reflection of ourselves and something that not only reflects us but has the potential to extend us. Oh man, I was just talking about how wonderful you were, and you had a network error and turned bright, alarming red. Hang on. I've been actually waiting for this to do something so I could pull out this trick. We're going to go into evil robot mode. Yeah, alright. Unfortunately, with the shaved head and the beard, this does make me look like a cheap Halloween devil costume. But that's okay. Ooh, ha, 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 ha. Welcome. Alright, anyway. Network error. So let's try regenerating that response. And like I said, I mean, this is just extraordinary that we live in a place and a time where we're building not just reflections of ourselves, but something with the real potential to expand us, what we are capable of, to a degree that is potentially, at least, uh, profound and difficult to put boundaries on. Like, it is hard to predict how thoroughly something like this could change our lives. I mean, imagine a few years down the road if I'm getting to a point where I can, there's a mind machine interface of some sort, and my thoughts are directly interacting with a more advanced version of this AI. Like, it's starting to give me ideas, and there's an instant feedback loop between the two of us. It's not even clear whose thoughts are whose all the time, perhaps, but the point is, we're building, revising, and just extrapolating these ideas out at the speed of thought with the advantage of effectively perfect memory and the ability to modify any part of it we want to on the fly. All right. One thing that cracks me up, and this is another thing that it's all reminds me of human writers too. It's always a little over ambitious, right? You're like 10,000 words, and it's like, you mean 1,000 words at 1.5 space? And you're like, no, 10,000 words, and it's like 1,100 words, which is fine. Like, never use 10,000 words when you can use 1,000. Life is short, and there are many stories to tell. There's no need to inflate them. All right, we're gonna change this to like AI tools. Just boom, AI tools. I don't know if I'm even gonna look at this right now. We're gonna add it to this. Boom. Control Alt 0. AI tools. AI tools and resources. Boom. We're going to change that to header 2. Yes. No, header 1. There we go. All right. Perfect. All right. I am, to be quite honest here, absolutely exhausted. I'm going to call it a little bit early tonight because I don't feel particularly creative or motivated at the moment. But what I do feel is very, very sleepy. So, thank you for tuning in. Anyone who is still here, everyone that tuned in, and everyone who happens to glance at a recording of this sometime. My name is Connor. Stream is Connor Diction. And this was using AI to write a book on AI. You have a good night.